Hello investors and welcome back to Just Ranting Stocks. During this video there will be no editing. I've got to get this one out because I have a few other things I have to do, but just to show you what it takes to get a video out. You might hear some little beeping in the background. I've got the Discord channel up because I wanted to do some orientation of what's available for you to be able to get information with the channel out there. So I'm going to walk you through a few things. This isn't going to be the most edited, beautiful looking video. I don't think any of them are the most high def, best looking videos, but I promised you that I would go through after the Q3 earnings and do a little bit more research, and I did that on the wiring harness, and I also sent that email out to the leadership team, specifically to Aaron, who's the Vice President of Investor Relations for Proterra. So I sent an email. I'm going to share with you what's in that email. We're going to cover that in this video. So if you want to hear about that, stick around. If not, we're not going to be talking about the news that came out today and the price action because you know where Proterra is a buy. It looks like we made it above 1250. For those of you that want to know about price action, in my opinion, long story short, it's too high right now to buy in. I think we still have the debt ceiling next week, potentially, that we're going to start hearing about. We've also got the lockup agreement that's coming. I think there's plenty of opportunities to buy Proterra at a lower price. Do I want it to go lower? Do I think it's going to go below 11? There's potential that it could. You've had plenty of opportunities to buy in. Do what you want with your money. Those are just my thoughts. I think it's high right now, but all EV plays are high. I mean, there is potential for there to be an EV bubble. There's just so much money being put into EV right now that I can't imagine that it doesn't bust at some point. So is there a major change? Is there enough demand? For buses specifically, I think it's a lot different than some of these other sectors. For personally owned vehicles, they might adopt these a little bit at a little bit slower rate. So the volume potential that we're going to be putting out, that some of these manufacturers are set to build this infrastructure and put these vehicles out, are we going to have hundreds of thousands of vehicles out there and oversupply and not enough demand? You know, the flower industry, are we going to repeat what happened in the flower industry? You know, so if you've been following that, there was this huge gold rush, a lot of people thinking they were going to make a lot of money, and then all of a sudden, you know, there was an oversupply. So is that going to happen with the vehicles? I think it's something to think about. So trade, when you buy into these stocks, you definitely want to make sure you're buying in low, and you want to pick a sector segment that's got potential growth in the future. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. First off, let me share with you the questions that I asked, and go ahead and drop a question in. I'm going to show you exactly where to put your questions if you don't want to put them in the comments below. These are the questions that I asked. I don't know that I'll get a response. I don't know that I'll get an interview with the CEO, but I did request it. I believe nobody's covered Proterra more than I have on YouTube, so will they respond? So the questions, my first one was about the wiring harness. So there's an alternate method to not using resin, which there's a global crisis with the resin, a shortage, and it's causing them not to be able to deliver buses. I found an article where it says that aluminum piping can be used as an alternative, and you can manufacture that in-house. I don't know whether or not they have that capability, but what are they doing to basically track pacing items, critical items? You know, do they have a critical items list? Do they have lead times and indicators, so on and so forth? What are they doing? What is in their strategy, their make-buy model, all of that? Basically, I rolled that up into one question. The second question was, you know, we just don't want buses sitting around with pacing items. So is there a good process for them to track that? You know, I'll probably need to clean the question up, make it a little bit more concise. But, you know, I just wanted to give them a heads up. So hopefully Aaron will reach out. I'll be able to go through with him what my questions are. We'll be able to agree on those and be able to get an answer and share that with you. So the next one is, it takes the buses 14 months to make, and they've been building buses for a long time. Have they not decreased the time it takes to make a bus? China does it in 30 days, and it takes us 14 months. So next year, when we start seeing this money, President signed the bill, and, you know, they're ready to put their order in for a bus. As soon as they put their order in, then we're not actually going to deliver that bus till 2023. It just seems like we should have an initiative or maybe there's something they could share with us to talk about how we decrease that time. Does it take more than government support? So government support in China started very early. So did we not start early enough with the government support, and is that a critical element that we're missing in the United States still? So it's not just about money. A lot of these organizations, the transportation agencies, the government agencies, everybody's got to work together to make this adoption happen. So just wanted to get a little bit more feedback on that 14 months build cycle. The plants are responsible for the build cycle. Automation, I don't know what we're doing to be able to keep up with future demand. So if we're going to 5x the business, how are we going to be able to keep up with that future demand? So the next question, I showed up to one of the calls. So I sat on one of their calls that they made available to their drivers, to drivers of the new buses, and nobody showed up to the call. They basically gave a call to an empty audience, and the driver's feedback on where they set up the infrastructure for charging stations and just feedback for the buses in general, it's really important. So are they keeping track of who doesn't show up to these calls? And is there anyone requiring drivers to show up to calls? Who are critical people, personnel, locations to make this happen? For example, let's say we decided to take the state of California and completely electrify it just to start, get an infrastructure there, because this is what they did in China. They took a city, made it 100% electric, so the rest of the nation or country could adopt it. And I think they gained a lot of momentum that way. Who needs to take the lead on getting critical feedback so we don't screw this up? What I see is a bunch of money being pumped in to the adoption of EV, and then us making a lot of mistakes because we're not talking, and learning from one another. So I was just curious, how does that driver leadership loop work? Who are the critical figures that need to be in this discussion, feedback discussion, so we don't make mistakes with putting stuff somewhere that it doesn't make any sense, and then we've wasted a bunch of money putting it there. So the CFO was released. They quit. Whatever happened with the CFO's departure, I was curious if the management team could share any additional information about the CFO's departure. The reason I'm curious about that is, there might be some legacy people in positions that hold a lot of critical information, and they might not have a solid infrastructure, and it can be very costly to not have a management system behind how long people are in their positions, and then, okay, well, is this person at risk to leave? Or what are we doing to keep them in the company? Do we know what their future plans are? So are they at risk? And typically there's systems and, ERP systems in place to help track and monitor this, and you have to review it, frequently. You do one-on-ones with your personnel to see, do they plan on leaving? People will be pretty transparent with you if you ask them. And the management of personnel can be critical, especially as this company decides to take on a second shift. I know these are very detailed explanations. Of course, the question wouldn't go like this, so I've got to rehearse that. But I told y'all this was going to be a rough one. I just wanted to let you know where my head's at. So it appears that we're still learning the capabilities of what this infrastructure can do when we were able to put electricity back into the grid with one of the buses. That caught me by surprise. I don't know who else that caught by surprise, but I was just curious, how big of a deal is this, and what are we still learning, and is there a communication structure internally to externally to gather this information and learn how EV adoption is really going to change the way we live to a benefit and help speed that process? Because really, I'm really trying to be forward thinking, and what I want to get a sense of is, do we have a leadership team through this interview that is also forward thinking? Are they leaders in the industry? And finally, my last question was, what are your thoughts on money being invested in EV right now? Is there a bubble? And I kind of touched on this before, but if you've looked at some of the prices of Ford and GM and some of those stocks, they haven't been at nearly the evaluations that we're starting to see of these companies that are popping up. Now here's one thing to think about. Combustion versus EV is, you know, EV is going to be ultimately so much cheaper to develop, maintain, you know, less parts, right? So everything's a lot cheaper. It's more profitable for a company to do EV. So I could see that as a lot of people being interested in becoming leaders in this space. So two other questions you might be asking yourself that I didn't ask in these questions that I sent to Aaron was, number one, the lockup agreement. I don't think Proterra can tell us who's going to sell, and it's not guaranteed that anybody's going to sell. On or about December 15th is the date, but prior to that, about 2 weeks prior, is when you could see some sell-off happening with that. So I don't think that's really a question that they would be able to provide any insight in. But hey, who knows? I don't know whether or not they could answer anything with that. Maybe it's a popular question. If it is, let me know in the comments below. The other thing is why isn't the share price higher than what it is now? Now we've seen it come off of that support. It finally responded to news. Maybe Proterra's willing to respond to news now. So it did. It came off of 1250. That was its level of resistance. I've seen that as a high. Analysts have this priced around, you know, an average price of about where it's sitting right now. So we're going to see some resistance unless something else happens. And the CEO commented in the call that Q4 was looking questionable because of supply chain concerns, maybe additional pacing items that they don't have a plan for at this time. Now, as they grow, they're going to have plans for these. They can't have pacing items consistently. They got to deliver buses. Then buses isn't all they do. They do more than just buses. So those are my thoughts on the Q3 earning call. Let me share my screen. I've got a few other things I want to share with you. All right, so if you're looking to send Proterra an email, the email address is IR or India Romeo at Proterra.com. And if you click on this button right here, it'll give you an email prompt to go to Aaron Chu, who is the Vice President of Investor Relations for Proterra. Now, I did look into the wiring harness, and I know that this is old, dated, and it does give an example of where pipe shielded wiring harness were used for made out of aluminum pipes other than resin protectors as protective material since 2005. So me just doing a simple search, I was able to do some reading. I think there's alternatives to resin, and I'm just curious, have they thought about that? Did they try that? Is this something they could make in-house to get those other buses ready? Now, Proterra is trading at about 1276 today. It did show support at this 1250 range, and actually the news today potentially helped the stock price. Now on tip rates, and this is why I'm saying below 11 would be a buy for Proterra. Now, I was saying buy this in the low 9. I think we've moved past that, and I believe if this does get up a little bit higher and it does meet some resistance in December, you know, that I would watch this to bounce back from low levels in the $10.50 range to $11 range. That's just a price target. You know, things could change after I release this video. So there's a lot of things that go into why the price is what it is. So I'm just telling you that the price is high right now. I would say it's elevated after that news release, that development. And it looks to be, the stock price looks to be responding to news. It did not respond in the past to news, but now it looks to be running like the rest of the EV market, which I believe is inflated. $11 is the low, $12.67 is the average price, and $15 is the high price. Okay, now let's go into where we have additional information for those of you that are new to the channel. There are tabs available up here. And if you click on the community tab, most of you default to the home or video tab. Click those notifications so that way you can get these videos when they come out. If you go on the community tab, there is a link for the Discord. I want you to join that Discord if you'd like to get these updates. And there's one thing that I want to tell you to do. When you download the Discord, you want to go up here to the top and go into the server settings. And you want to make sure you scroll down and put this default notification settings. You want to change this immediately so this does not drive you nuts, and go to only at mention. So when someone mentions your name, that's when you get notified, or in everyone or something like that. So when people are just talking, you don't get notifications for that. I also want to let you know about the information, how I prioritize it, My Patreon members get information first. I try and make sure I get on there and give them updates first. This is what that looks like. You could go to Patreon. You could use the description. There's no requirement to do this. This is just supporting the channel. Now, the Discord is for free, but the Patreon is only $5 to participate, and you're going to get notifications like I sent out today for PRVB, which was a good runner, and then previous to that, we had Polestar in the $11 range. I sent out notifications, and you can see that's ran up to 16 at one point. This is probably the longest video I've ever made. I do want to thank you. You're truly legendary if you made it to the end of this video. Don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one.